Hello and thank you for stopping by. Today is 19th June, Father's Day, and here is wishing all the good dads out there a very happy Father's Day. I have birthed two sons and it's indeed a very important day for me as well. With that, let us move into this video, and the content of this video is around a very important theme for all Indians. As an Indian, you would have witnessed that over the last few years there has been a proliferation of devices, the cheapening of data and bandwidth charges, and also a rise of online services, which I'm sure would have led to an important question in your mind: is are we really progressing towards a mature digital economy, or is this a temporary blip of technology excellence in our country? With that, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to kind of talk about the journey towards India's digitization, how we stack up against a reference frame of 17, 18 countries, which includes mature digital countries, smaller countries which have done very well in digital, and also BRICS countries, and to say where we exactly stack up, deconstruct the digital index into multiple elements to say what we are good at and what we are not, talk about India's digital theme and digital mission, and therefore, after all of that, talk about how Indian companies need to respond if India would be a digitally mature economy. This takes a lot of effort to kind of produce these videos. So if you like it, show us some love. Like and share the content as you deem fit. With this, let me kind of move to the presentation. And here goes: building a digital economy in India. Two important questions. First is to understand India's journey towards an empowered digital nation, and is the $1 trillion ambition achievable, or is it the government's optics? And if that be true, and if there be substance in the $1 trillion ambition, how should Indian companies reimagine themselves to be relevant in a mature digital economy? And here goes. The presentation has three basic parts. The first is an overview of the country's digital index, to say that how do you measure the maturity of any country's digitization process and the digital models, and how India stacks up against a reference frame of 17 economies. The second element is around India's national goal and how the government is planning out its digital themes, specific activities, and so on and so forth. And finally, to talk about how is the Indian consumer changing as a result of the change of the consumer, how is technology making permanent changes in habits of customers, and therefore how should the business models of analog companies shift to create space for the new normal to play out in the country. With that, let's talk about India's digital journey, and this is the country's digital index. The country's digital index, any country's digital index, is a standard framework used to evaluate the maturity of digitization of a nation. Has three basic elements: the foundation element, which is the availability of digital infrastructure, bandwidth availability, spectrum, download speed, availability, and so on and so forth. The base elements are the foundation layer. Then comes the digital reach, the penetration or ownership or use of digital devices and services, by the population, the content, the accessibility, relevance, data consumption, and so on and so forth. And then the digital value, which is the usage of various digital applications to improve efficiencies and reduce cost of services and products, which is the ultimate outcome of it. Now, if you look at India's digital index, which was computed in 2017, was 32 as against 16 or 17 in 2013 and 14, which is about 100% growth, almost 100% growth from the 2013-14 levels, next only to Indonesia. Having said so, India stacks a bit low compared to the digitally mature nations, where South Korea is the highest. The others are around 60 to 70 mark, and China, which is a fairly important reference for us given the complexity, depopulation, topography, which is at 47. Now, a pure numeric is not necessarily a perfect reflection of the journey that India or China has covered, because the topography, the complexity, the poverty, the inequality, and all of that makes digital adoption not such an easy task. So it would be fair to say that India is probably in a digital lift-off mode, but it is also important to understand amongst the three pillars of the index how India stacks up across the three pillars, which is what we're going to talk in the following slide. In terms of the foundation pillar, the biometric identification functionality and digital signature, which is the digital identity, India scores a perfect 100, and it's probably a best use case globally, where China is 58 and US only 35. We have done very well in network availability and also government online services, where the government engages with the citizenry and there are no intermediaries around to give efficient services. However, in terms of the digital reach and digital value is where we are not doing very well compared to our global peers. In terms of broadband network penetration, which is a matter of concern, and also the download speeds are not world class, right? And therefore the value capture is all in the works right now, which is, while there are a lot of work that has been happening around digital value, the actualization of this value in real terms, in economic terms, is something which has not matured, but it is in work in progress, and we're going to talk about how the government is doing, how the government is managing this process going forward, and what is in store for us, for Indian citizens. Now, if you look at the digital aspiration, it has been outlined by 9 digital goals and 30 themes, and there is another parallel document which is the AI vision for India, which is a Niti Aayog's document. And I'll just, without going into the 9 themes which you can see in the slide, I'm going to talk about a few of them and underlining the salient features. When you talk about e-governance of the future, there is an app called Umang, Unified National Mobile Application for New Age Governance, where about 205 government services across 38 government departments you can access in a manner which is frictionless and convenient. The other important thing is, building a healthy nation is a cornerstone of the success of the nation, and we as one nation have issues in terms of our delivery of health services, the doctor-patient ratios, and inequality distribution of healthcare facilities. Now the government is trying to kind of bring in e-delivery of health services through e-clinics and hospitals, so that's another big theme. Also EHR, which is a public employee individual health data, where the health of every individual is not in forms of prescriptions or chits which cannot be consolidated for analytics purposes. So an public EHR system is getting built. Similarly, similarly affordability of healthcare through multiple pension schemes, and also the creation of the India Health Stack, which actually makes healthcare more affordable and connects users, payers, and health providers in a single platform is getting built. Second most important thing as far as I am concerned is the quality education. While the gross enrollment ratio of India over time has improved, and that has nothing much to do with government intervention, it is how the country has matured, but the dropout ratio still remains very high. Now, technology can help managing the dropout ratio through adaptive learning technologies, where the content of a particular subject can be calibrated and assessments can be calibrated depending upon the need of every learner, thereby facilitating differential learning styles in the same cohort or in the classroom. Now that obviously requires a very robust bandwidth, which the National Knowledge Commission is trying to build, but it's still on the works. So while the design or the strategy is in place, the implementation requires a bit of effort and time and investments as we go along. The other important thing is doubling of farmers' income, which the government is very, very committed to, notwithstanding what happened in the farm laws thing. Now Indian agriculture is about 13% of the GDP and employs 45% of our population. However, farm productivity is anywhere between 10 to 50% lower than advanced South Asian counterparts, and there are issues in terms of soil health, precision farming, and so on and so forth. So digital initiatives around doubling the farmer's income at one level is the government has actually given millions of soil cards away, which is actually telling the farmer the health of the soil and how to manage agricultural practices, which then doubled up with precision farming practices which are done through satellite imaging of the farmland, is helping farmers improve farming practices. The third important thing is platform, which is the ENAM, or Electronic National Agricultural Market, which is giving price support to farmers. A combination of all of this will eventually lead to the goal of enabling doubling farmers' income. Similarly, next generation financial services, here the big theme is around making MSMEs, giving credit or accessing credit of the MSMEs, which through the formal sector is very low, and most of the MSME credit is in the informal sector. So there's a concept called digital flow based lending, which enables, or embedded finance, which enables through public APIs the MSMEs and the financial service providers to access data about the MSMEs, do their credit history as against through the formalized documents. So that's another big theme. Now, when I looked at the 30 themes around it, I classified it into three big areas, and here goes. Now, of the 30 themes, 10 themes were around platforms, where the users and the service providers were brought in, and inefficiencies in the process of buying and selling the government wants to eliminate. Similarly, the other important thing is delivery of services. Digital delivery of services could be in the form of delivering healthcare services through e-hospitals that I mentioned, or giving farmers soil health cards and precision medicine advice, precision farming practices advice is delivery of services. Digital infrastructure and foundational elements is giving broadband security, broadband access to the Bharat broadband network, and bringing all of it together. So the 30 themes and investments around the 30 themes is going to create the entire ecosystem of digital in our country real. Now, if you look at the adoption across the states, obviously it is uneven adoption, but the needle is moving in the right direction. Execution right now is not perfect, but the design is as good as we can imagine it to be. The question is, does the government have the bandwidth of executing it fast, and the execution elements are being put in place? So if you were to criticize the government on execution at this point in time, one needs to take into account the complexity of execution, the literacy of Indian population, and the topography and so on and so forth makes it very difficult. However, there has been substantial progress made on that count. So to summarize, I would give a thumbs up to the government on imagination, design, and also give them a fair credit on the execution as it is, but obviously it's not perfected. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about the big platforms. The platforms are the big moves. Now, if you look at government's e-marketplace, this is about 1,50,000 sellers selling 500,000 products, and 5,000 services have been registered, which removes the friction between the buying and selling process and creates a fair marketplace around it. Similarly, all of us would have seen the digital locker, where all your documents are uploaded, and through a consenting process and an e-sign or an e-KYC process, these documents could be accessed by anybody else, where the paper form, it's a paperless and a presenceless layer combined, which makes a lot of transactions smoother, and the data around the transactions are captured to make services better. Similarly, the National Agricultural Marketplace, which coordinates the work of the APMCs, gives minimum support price to the farmers. Now, if you look at logistics, now 13 to 14% of our GDP is a logistics cost, where it is about 9% in the United States and 8% in the UK. The logistics platform is built to remove the inefficiencies around logistics and bring down prices and bring down the impact to less than 10%. And similarly, Meghraj, which is the government cloud initiative, which is the infrastructure platform around all of this. Moving on, the important question for business people here is, how should companies respond if India were to become digital? Now, it's not a simple answer. We've got to understand how the Indian consumer is changing. So the next few slides, I'm going to talk about how the Indian consumer is changing, what are the nature of changes, what kind of changes, and therefore what industries are going to get impacted. And the other important thing that I'm going to talk about is how is the Indian startup ecosystem fueling this change. And after that, I'm going to leave you with a framework of response, right? So stay put with me for that period. Now, if you look at, this is from the TRI data, December 2021, the latest TRI data. What is important here is the mobile data consumption per month is galloping at an unbelievable rate. It is almost 15 GB right now, when it was 12.33 GB about a year ago. So that's a very significant rise. Similarly, the minutes of usage is 854 minutes as against 818 minutes. So if you look at mobile data consumption across the other digital native countries, now Korea is a very digitally mature country, but with a score of 75 in its index, if I remember correctly, it is only 7.75. But China is 7 GB, and we are almost double that. We're more than double all of these countries, which means India is a mobile first economy with a high consumption rate of data. What we are consuming, the way we are engaging with brands, and obviously a young country, determines the position of the brand in the World Wide Web and what the consumers are seeking from these enterprises. And obviously the social media users has also increased, and most of the social media users are on mobile. So it's a mobile first, high data consumption social economy that is evolving right now in India. Now, if you look at a classical digital world, the consumer has a digital footprint. It engages with the World Wide Web, and the time it spends with these huge big tech platforms, actually data gets captured. So the time that we spend on Facebook becomes proprietary to Facebook, or the time that we spend on Google doing a search makes Google's data even more richer, its advertisement even stronger, and all of this gets turned back into a unique value proposition. So classical Web 2.0 is about the centralized web, which is held hostage to the the big tech companies like the Amazons, the Googles, and the Apples of the world. So that's the basic story of digital, and people who are part of ecosystems, large ecosystems, benefit out of it. So this is the bigger view. Now, if I look at the India specific response to the same thing, is as I talked about, it's a mobile first customer. India also has proprietary systems, the big tech available in India. Indians spend time on that. But the most important thing from a government standpoint is creation of universal digital platforms, much of which that we talked about, and the APIs. Application programming interface with a number of APIs is created for consumers, business, and government agencies, is enabling data access for other parties, which can be monetized over a period of time. Now, this is being monetized by digital natives much better, and startups much better than classical companies. For instance, if you look at the Aadhaar eKYC process, which eKYC, the Aadhaar payment bridge, and eSign is completely transforming consumer onboarding and engagement processes, changes the way credit evaluation is going to happen. Similarly, the GSTN network and the public API around the GSTN network enables you to build an algorithm to do credit assessment without seeking actual GST records or bank records from the consumer. I'll give you an example. So on the beneath the GSTN icon right now, here you would see an SMS which is based on my GST filings of one of my enterprises, which is an MSME. They have actually approved a loan of 1 crore under the MSME Yojana scheme. And it's an instant approval, and I did not want that loan. That's a different issue altogether. But the offering of the loan and the engagement that Lending Card has done is truly remarkable for the way the classical incumbents respond. So I'll give you another example. I'm actually going through a home loan process with one of the leading private sector banks. They have asked for physical copies of my GST records, all my bank records, all my ITRs, and so on and so forth, which through a consenting process they could have actually generated without getting through that process. And that credit evaluation cycle is pretty long, while in the digital native the credit evaluation and assessment cycle is insta credit, right? So the shift here is analog companies need to remove inefficiencies in their process to engage the consumers better. Otherwise the Indian startups is going to take your breakfast away from you, and probably your lunch and survival. At this point in time, it would probably be interesting to figure out how the startup ecosystem is shaping up. Now, before that, we're going to talk about how the consumer is changing, and from there we move on to the startup ecosystem. Now, the new normal is the rise of the contactless economy, which is premised on three basic things: convenience, at my time, at my pace, at my rhythm. How am I going to shop is how I decide, not on when you're going to sell. The second important thing is on choice, which is personalization. Know my world better, it's a segment of one. Don't give me curated content, but give me classified assortments and personalized, and if possible, hyper personalized. Every experience has to be intuitive and seamless, not like the experience that I have with my banks right now. As a result of which of these industries are going to get disrupted big time, and this is a shout out to these industries to watch out how they're going to be disrupted. E-tailing, staples, discretionary. The CPG, FMCG companies, it's not a product push environment. The consumer is going to decide, my shopping basket is going to be decided at my time. The delivery and convenience is going to be a key determinant as much as quality is going to be, as much as it's going to be for staples, grocery and discretionary products. Second, banking and financial services. Huge amount of work has already happened. A lot of incumbent banks are doing very well in the digital space, but that said, this is still a big gap. Embedded finance. When I am in my purchasing journey, if I need money, you should be there to lend me money. It's not the classical Medici banking thing that I go to the bank for money. The bank comes to me in my journey of purchasing. Similarly, if I'm an MSME, you have to be there in my flow-based lending. When my supply chain, there is a working capital gap, and it is an episodic and a continuous gap, be there from my GSTN records and offer me money as against I going to you with a working capital demand loan kind of thing and then a credit limit and blah 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 blah, so on and so forth. Remove the inefficiencies in your processes. Third important thing, the content that I consume. This is a shout out to media and entertainment. 15 GB of data is a huge amount of content getting consumed. It is more than twice that the mature digital world is consuming. So what is the content that I'm consuming? The way that I consume it, the bit size content. So it is a shout out to the NDTVs and Times of the world. Though you might have an incumbency position in the digital world in your space, but the way you're going to broadcast content to me, bit size content, relevant content, depending upon my thing, not fake news or deep fakes, is a matter that you need to think through very, very deeply. Similarly, health and wellness, because if the world of health is moving from reactive care to preventive care, opens a huge space around wellness, nutrition and so on and so forth, which is going to change the way care will be dispensed. Now, one level of care is the primary care, digital care and so on and so forth, but the entire behavioral system of using nudges to enable me to complete my care protocols is a thing that a lot of new businesses will be built on. Moving on, let us look at how the startup economy in India is shaping up. Indian startup ecosystem. We are the house of the third largest unicorns are from India, and we've already reached 100 unicorns. Unicorns are one with a $1 billion valuation. Key sectors where unicorns and funded unicorns are making a big moves are e-commerce and fintech, 23 and 21% respectively. So the Mishos of the world, Moblix, Nykas are going to shape the way consumers are going to purchase. For instance, I buy my car insurance from ACO, and the ACO experience is very seamless as against a telecaller who harasses me every day on buying insurance, which are expensive, inefficiency laden, and the experience is terrible. Now, if you look at these unicorns between 2020 to 2021, the peak of COVID, the valuation of the unicorns increased 300%. I mean, the number of unicorns increased 300% to China's 267%, which would say that the contactless economy is likely going to stay. So therefore, if you are not in the realm of virtual experience and whatever that you said, you're going to probably lose out. Moving on, we're going to look at a framework that I have constructed to give a matrix of responses for Indian companies. I've talked about it in a previous video, but I thought it was important to bring it. Much of what I had said about a few months ago still holds true. Choices for incumbents is removing efficiencies in the current value chain. My experiences of banking. So what is an inefficiency? Inefficiency is a way of delivering a product and service with friction. It might be the best you are doing right now, but if the digital native is doing it better, for me it is an inefficient process, which means the credit appraising for my home loan through a private sector bank, which involves multiple documents being shifted, and if it is not done on the cloud through a consenting process on public APIs, it is inefficient for me, right? So that is the nature of inefficiency. So figure out where you are inefficient in delivering convenience to your consumers. Second important thing is reimagine the business design. Like the example that we talked about, embedded finance. Now if you look at Bajaj Finserv, it is moving itself from a classical NBFC where people would go for episodic finance requirements to an instantaneous credit through a zero EMI credit format. So Bajaj Finance is one which has reimagined its business design and moved from an NBFC to an embedded finance player. So much so forth. So banks need to be, flow players. Third important thing is create new pools of value. Now, what is a new pool of value? Look around the adjacencies. So, for instance, if you look at Dr. Lal's Path Labs as a pathological player, or Medinova, or any of these diagnostic centers, a huge amount of data that you guys have should put health finance corporations, which is the health insurance corporations, collaborate with them and give me give me customized insurance code as against a general code. Now that is a transformation that needs to happen. The other important thing, transforming product as a service, and there are multiple cases of products being transformed to the service, Hilti, Michelin, Cat, and there is a huge story around it. But I'll not go into that in details for the interest of time. And I'll now coming back the lessons, in terms of summarizing the video, it is about, yes, the moves that the country is making towards digital are substantive. The data bears it out. Execution has been a challenge, but probably this government is doing better than any other in terms of imagining and executing. Execution will take time, but the most important thing is data consumption. The data consumption of young India, and India is a young country, is increasing leaps and bounds, which is a great indication of it on the lift-off journey towards a higher level of digital maturity. So I would reckon, if you are in the business of e-tailing, financial services, media and entertainment, health and wellness, you have 4 or 5 years to respond to this threat. And it is not about creating a digital channel on an analog business model, but to completely reimagine your business model to stay relevant in India. Stay tuned, more about this later, and hope you liked it. Share, comment as you deem fit, and thank you for watching. Have a good day.